Doctors around the world work tirelessly every day, fighting to make life-saving decisions. They are accustomed to the new challenges and haven't been surprised by anything in a while. The story we share with you today managed to touch the hearts of millions of people in a short time and made them reconsider things. They realized that support often comes from places where you least expect it. One nurse working in a hospital recently told of an incident where an elderly man was brought in with a heart attack. A quick guard was called, and the staff moved into action, preventing the patient from dying. One of the gentleman's neighbors noticed he wasn't feeling well and called an ambulance. He was taken to the hospital for surgery straight away. Doctors and hospital staff are experts in their field and were able to quickly help this man. Due to his age, they made the decision to place him in the intensive care unit just in case he deteriorated. In the same time, hospital staff couldn't have imagined strange things would soon begin to happen in his care. One day, a nurse named Anastasia noticed a pigeon sitting on the ledge of the intensive care unit window, but the woman didn't read much into it. It wasn't all that unusual, but then it happened again. The next day, the poor feathered fellow still sat by the window and looked at the man in the room, and neither rain nor heat to chase it away. Time passed, and the patient gradually came to his senses, and after a while, he was transferred to a regular room with other patients. But even though the patient moved, the pigeon didn't fly away and abandon its post at the window. It simply moved to the window of the patient's new room and continued to sit there. Strange, isn't it? But then there was more. Sometimes the bird left its post, but it would always come back. At one time, it even began to nervously peck at the window. This went on for several days. And when the hospital staff opened the window to let the fresh air in, the pigeon flew into the room and landed on the old man's bed while he was fast asleep. The pigeon walked around for a bit and then jumped onto the windowsill and settled down there. When the nurse was making rounds, she noticed the bird and immediately chased it away. But since it was summer, the hospital staff had to open the windows in each room anyway. So the next day, the pigeon flew into the same room again and did the exact same thing. At first, Anastasia thought to chase away the unwanted guest again, but then she decided to watch it instead. The pigeon sat on the man's bed, then jumped onto the windowsill, and sometime later, it flew out the window and circled nearby. It did so every day. The bird began to fly, and even when the man was awake. And of course, the old man didn't chase it away. Watching his guest, the man muttered something softly under his breath and didn't take his eyes off it. A while later, when the doctors were satisfied with how the treatment was going, they allowed the old man to take a walk in the local park. The nurse watched the old man through the window, and as soon as he got outside, pigeons immediately gathered around him. So the man took pieces of bread from lunch and fed his feathered friends every day. The nurse was amazed at the bird's love for the patient, but she didn't dare to ask why the pigeons were so quick to gather around the old man. The woman was also wondering why no one has visited their patient during the entire time he was getting treatment. So plucking up her courage, she decided to ask him about it. It turned out that the man had 2 children, but during his entire stay at the hospital, he hardly spoke to anyone. Moreover, it wasn't hard to notice that he was sad all the time. At first, he was reluctant to talk about his life, but did eventually tell that his wife had passed away a few years ago, and the children had long started their own families and didn't come to visit their father much. They probably didn't even know that the man was at the hospital. Unfortunately, it seemed that no one really cared about him, so the nurse asked about the pigeon that came to visit the old man every day. And why was it that pigeons always gathered around the man as soon as he got outside? And it turned out that breeding pigeons has been old man's hobby for a long time. There was a small dovecote in his yard, which the men have been tending to for several years. And that's probably why his loyal birds tried to visit their friend every day. The man said that he didn't know how they even figured out that he was at the hospital, because it was several steps away from his house. At the same time, he was pleasantly surprised and even shocked when he first saw one of them come visit him at the hospital. Fortunately, 3 weeks later, the old man was discharged from the hospital and got to go home. Meanwhile, the nurse shared this story online, saying, "It's been 23 days since this patient came to the hospital, and in these 23 days, nobody from his family came to visit him. But there was a pigeon which comes every 2 days to sit next to his bed. The pigeons stay in one place for a while and then fly away. Sometimes people forget, but the birds remember. Don't forget about your elderly mothers and fathers. because it's not uncommon for animals to be loyal and compassionate even if humans are often not. Spending time with parents over the phone is always a good idea. Most importantly, it can make them happy, and it's also a wonderful way to spend time with them.